Lesson 15. Corroborating Evidence. Sheriff. The bank was robbed yesterday evening by a guy who fits your description. Did you do it? Rusty. I wasn't anywhere near the bank yesterday evening, Sheriff. If we know someone has a reason to lie, then we should closely examine his story and look for other evidence which agrees with what he says. We call this corroborating evidence. Someone has corroborating evidence when there are other witnesses, records, or evidence which support the same idea. If Rusty were accused of a crime which he did not commit, then he would like somebody to come forward and say that he was somewhere else at the time of the crime that was committed. The person would be corroborating Rusty's story. Barber. That's right. He was with me in the barber shop getting his hair cut. The barber is corroborating Rusty's story. In the sheriff's eyes, the barber makes Rusty's story stronger and even more believable, and Rusty couldn't have been robbing a bank and getting his hair cut at the same time. Corroborating evidence does not have to be in the form of another witness. It can be found in physical evidence as well. Deputy. Look there! There's some of Rusty's hair lying on the floor of the barber shop. That seems to indicate that he was here last night. Notice how that last piece of evidence doesn't necessarily mean that Rusty was in the barber shop last night. The hair could have been planted there or fallen from earlier in the day, but it does support his story. I'm right. No, I'm right. Rule for corroborating evidence. The more corroborating evidence a source has, the stronger it becomes. This means the more witnesses and bits of evidence Rusty can find which seem to indicate that he was in the barber shop at the time of the crime, the stronger Rusty's story becomes in the eyes of the sheriff. Other pieces of evidence which would corroborate Rusty's story could include a receipt from the barber dated at the time of the robbery, another person in the barber shop who saw him there at that time, or the fact that Rusty's hair appears to have been recently cut. Sometimes a corroborating witness cannot do very much for the person he corroborates. If someone is being accused of a crime, then he has a reason to lie. If his corroborating witness is also being accused of the crime, then he also has a reason to lie. Both suspects are still on shaky ground. Sheriff. Where were both of you last night around 7 o'clock? Scarface. I was outside of town sleeping in the sagebrush. Dead-Eye Dan. That's true. I can corroborate his story. I was there with him. Scarface. Yeah, I can corroborate that Dead-Eye Dan didn't rob the bank either. He was in the sagebrush with me. Exercise A1. What is the rule for corroborating evidence? B. Below each quote or story are some pieces of evidence. Say whether the piece of evidence corroborates the quote. Rusty. It wasn't me who robbed the bank yesterday evening. It was Scarface. I saw him do it. I was sitting in the barber's chair getting my hair cut when I see Scarface and his pal Dead-Eye Dan go to the bank with guns drawn. They came out a little while later with bags of money. Number 2. Scarface's fingerprint was found on the bank's safe. 3. Uranium Uriah. There weren't just one feller who robbed that bank. I saw two go in. I was in the general store getting supplies when I sees two people go into the bank. Then they comes out with bags of money. Number 4. Molly Brown up the street did not see Rusty go into the bank last evening. 5. Scarface and Dan were seen by witnesses this morning at the general store buying a set of expensive clothes, 2 pearl-handled 6-shooters, and 2 cases of Dutch chocolates. 6. Dead-Eye Dan says he was over in the saloon when the robbery happened. 7. The saloon keeper says Dead-Eye Dan was in his saloon yesterday evening. Before alligators were protected by law, you could buy baby ones in Florida and Georgia for a few dollars as a souvenir. Many were sold without any regard for how difficult a pet an alligator would be. In New York City alone, hundreds of these small gators were flushed down toilets or even set free to eventually end up in the city's sewer system. The baby gators adapted to this environment quickly by feeding on rats and other sewer dwellers. Generations later, these alligators became albino and went blind from the lack of light. Also, they grew very large with no competition for other predators. Occasionally, sewer workers and bums will disappear when the rat supply dwindles. Number 8. Joe the cab driver says he once saw an alligator in a sewer. It was big and white. It had the largest teeth you could imagine. Number 9. Over the past years, the population of rats in New York has dwindled. 10. There have been reports of crocodiles living in the sewer systems of some Indonesian cities. 11. The New York City Health Department denies that there are any alligators living in the sewer system. 12. An expedition led to the famous explorer Cal Thorntonmugg ventured into the sewer system of New York but found no alligators. It was pretty dark down there. They could be living in there, but we didn't see any. I wish I had brought a flashlight. 13. Barbara from Muskogee, Oklahoma, thinks that there are probably alligators living in New York. 14. A dead alligator was found lying beside the track along a subway line last April. C. In the following examples, find any known reason for the source to be questioned for reliability. 15. Homeschooled children and youth develop strong ties with their parents and siblings. Research shows that they are also socially, emotionally, and psychologically healthy and strong. Worldwide Guide to Homeschooling by Brian D. Ray, PhD, head of National Home Education Research Institute. 16. Sir Knight, I know now not who thou art, but I do pledge my knightly word that thou art the most potent knight that ever I have met in all my life. King Arthur. 17. History book. During the early years of colonization in America, the first settlers worked hard and faced many difficulties. They hoped to create a better way of life for themselves in the colonies. 18. I've been taking Focus Factor since we introduced it 2 years ago. I wouldn't work a day without it. Rob Graham, president of Focus Factor. 19. Queen Elizabeth learned to drive during World War II as a young volunteer in the Army, and she still drives her own stick-shift Land Rover when she's at Balmoral, her country estate in Scotland.